Hello and welcome to the Football Diary podcast. You would have been hosted by Mike today, but it turns out his name was in the wrong pot. We did a redraw and now I'm here to host instead. We would have had John joining us as a guest, but actually he won his group, so he's already through to the next round. So Dave is here for the playoff to join me and try and unpick what on earth is going on with football right now, because it seems like it's just falling apart, doesn't it, Dave? Welcome, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, mate. Just trying to make sense of all this confusing news. So, of course, we had the Champions League draw this week, and that was an interesting state of affairs. So, we'll talk about that. I don't quite understand the Europa League draw. I'm not sure you do. I'm not sure anyone else does, but we'll try and cover that briefly as well. Who knows what's going on in the Conference League? We don't even know if Spurs are in it. COVID obviously is running football a bit riot today, so we'll talk about that briefly and how that kind of affects the rest of the season. And more chaos at Arsenal and Everton as well. So a lot for us to digest this week, Dave, but we'll start with the Champions League draw. So first of all, Dave, explain to me what happened. Why did we have two draws?
I can't tell you what I'm just to form a basic draw and somehow get it wrong. Following on from obviously the Formula One the day before, we're talking about. I honestly don't know whether there's some kind of manipulation in there, dragging on from the previous day for the Formula One. But yeah, honestly, I just can't really fathom it, because if United end up in obviously the runners-up pot, and then we're getting drawn against PSG, who were also in the runners-up pot, how does that actually even,
So what actually happened then? The talk of what actually happened, just to break it down. Man United were drawn against Villarreal. Of course, you're not allowed to play a team that you were in the same group as or a team from the same country. So they had to be redrawn. However, instead of being put back into the pot for the next draw, someone just kind of popped the ball down on the side and kept drawing, which then meant that Man United weren't available to be drawn against Atletico Madrid when they should have been available to be drawn against Atletico Madrid. That's why the redraw took place. There is a lot of uproar about this. Of course, Florentino Perez has got a lot to say about it from Real Madrid's point of view. They've now drawn PSG, of course, after originally drawing Benfica. And he's very angry at it, saying that the draw should have taken place again, yes, but after his team had already been picked. Always Perez wants something. But this new draw opens up a lot of interesting ties as well, doesn't it, Dave? Obviously, we would have liked to have seen Messi versus Ronaldo. That would have been a really interesting one for us to watch. I think Atletico Bayern would have been a really interesting tie. But there's enough to unpick in what we actually do have now, Dave. Starting with your team, of course. Man United play Atletico Madrid in the Champions League now. What do you think? Is that a better draw than you originally had? What are you expecting from those ties?
Yeah, I think from what I've seen from Atletico this season, they've not been particularly great in the league. And I think both teams will be looking at it as, do you know what, it probably could have been worse. And I think that will be the mindset of both teams. Atletico will think they've got a chance against United, and United will be thinking, do you know what, we'd rather play Atletico than PSG. So it's going to be an interesting time, because we've not played Atletico for quite a few years. I think I can't remember a fixture actually since I've been watching the Champions League when we've actually come up against them. So it'll be an interesting one. Hopefully not too much of a boring affair. With
I've got to say, mate, I think it's pretty destined to be a boring affair. It's Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid against Ralph Rangnick's Man United, who haven't really been the most entertaining side so far, it's safe to say. So is there much hope for anything other than a couple of 0-0s or maybe even a 1-0 every now and again to settle this one?
It could be. You never know. I mean, with how we played against Norwich at the weekend, I'm sure Atletico will be looking at it. We can exploit this team, because we're vulnerable, I'd say, probably on the counter when we play like that. So, and that's how Atletico like to attack and play, through the counter. And they've got some talented players in there. Some of them who probably not played as well as they did last season, the likes of Felix, who's yet to kind of really step up and live up to his price tag. So I believe that there'll be a lot of belief from both teams in feeling that they can progress into the next round.
Yeah, well, never shy of being part of the narrative. The biggest thing for me, really, in this is Cristiano Ronaldo coming up against his best mates, Atletico Madrid. He's had plenty of exchanges with them in the past, it's safe to say. I think he scored 4 hat-tricks against them, including one in the Champions League for Juventus when he last faced them. So do you see him being extra fired up for this tie? Obviously, the Champions League is his competition. This is his big rivals. He had the whole thing with Simeone and the gesture when he was at Juventus. So do you think he'll be the difference in this tie?
It's set up for him, isn't it, really? Obviously, you look at that last one he played against Atletico when he was at Juventus and he scored that hat-trick in the second leg. And obviously, they went on to progress. He obviously got a huge amount of flack in that first leg. Atletico fans were on the high horse and, they thought they were going through. But, yeah, as we're seeing with Ronaldo, especially Champions League is his competition, so I can see him being well up for it. And for some reason, I don't want to say that he looks more motivated for the Champions League, but he kind of looks like he's kind of knows it's his scene, and he's made difference in pretty much all of our matches. He's made huge contribution to every game so far. So 100%, doesn't need any incentive against Atletico.
Well, as for the one that got away, PSG, they move on to actually face Atletico's Madrid rivals, Real. Again, plenty of narrative there. Lionel Messi coming back up against Real Madrid again. The return of some players, Di Maria, Hakimi, and more importantly, Sergio Ramos going back to Real Madrid already. You can see why Perez is angry from a Real Madrid point of view. 2 big, big names in this year's competition. Who comes out on top in this one then, Dave?
I think what would be interesting to see is in this game, I think it will reflect the competitiveness of both leagues and kind of show us, who's sort of on top at the moment. In obviously, you've got in Liga, PSG most weeks are getting fixture, having a few struggles here and there, but and then obviously we're still sort of unsure on. La Liga, we speak of it at the minute as it's kind of taken a few steps down since, Ronaldo kind of left was the first step. And obviously Messi leaving, and now they're kind of lacking a few superstars in that league. But the competitive nature of it it's okay. Maybe the teams are closer together when then 2 superpowers were at the top of the league in Real Madrid and Barcelona, but it's hard to say that they're better teams now in there, and so it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top on that. I feel like it's a bit of a 50-50 because PSG, you don't really know what you're going to get for them, especially in the Champions League. But it's whether them 3 players turn up top, and you never know. I think Real Madrid could be more of a collective effort from them that actually sees top, because we're still seeing a bit of instability in that PSG, the balance of the team on a whole just doesn't look right. So it'll be a very fascinating tie, more so just because obviously Real Madrid and the team that they are now, obviously there's still some experienced heads in there, but the likes of Vinicius, he's been brilliant this season so far, so it'll be interesting to see how he does against PSG. And obviously they're set up. So, definitely, I'm looking forward to it.
They're 2 really interesting sides in this year's competition, really, aren't they? Because they both come with a pedigree for very different reasons. Real Madrid because of the history, PSG because of the money. Yet neither of them really seem to be nailed on favourites for it. Despite the fact that PSG have assembled this incredible squad, there's still shortcomings, like you say. We've definitely not seen the best of Lionel Messi since he's been there. In the league, he's really struggling for form. And in the Champions League, he has looked better. That front 3 hasn't quite found its way of clicking yet. And they're kind of taking teams apart in France just because no one else in France is really up for in any competition. Whereas Real Madrid, that just looks like a squad that needs rejuvenating. Yeah, you talk about Vinicius and the fact that he's stepping up, but really they're being carried by the likes of Benzema and Luka Modric, who aren't getting any younger, really. So this is a case of the old guard and the history coming up against the new rich, and it'll be interesting to see which one of them comes out of it, because essentially one of the big hitters is gone in this round automatically. It's not the only tie that I think is worth noting. The other interesting one for me is Inter Milan against Liverpool, one that I'm quietly excited for. But what do you think? Do you think there's anyone that's got the capability of stopping Liverpool in the competition right now?
I feel like Liverpool will progress, just because I'm not quite sure Inter have got the. I know we've seen Italian teams obviously this season in Europa, and has been a little bit of inconsistency, and whether they are quite competitive enough to kind of overcome some of the English sides. And we've seen obviously the last couple of years Atalanta, who scored most goals in Serie A over the last few seasons, not being able to go toe to toe with the likes of Liverpool, not necessarily go toe to toe, but be able to sustain the sort of pressure that they can put on a team. So, I mean, for me, it'd be interesting to see how Inter do. The team for me in Serie A, I enjoy to watch at the minute in Napoli, and that's even with the absence of I can't think of his name now. Nigerian striker they've got.
Oh, Osimhen.
Yeah, that's even with the absence of them. Who it's been a revelation in that division this season. But
we'll come to Napoli in a second.
I just think
Napoli in a second, because I want to talk about the Europa League draw. But I look at this Champions League draw now. So the first question is, how many of the 4 English teams do you think get through? Chelsea, Lille, Manchester City, Sporting Lisbon, Manchester United, Atletico Madrid, Liverpool, Inter.
You've got to say that probably all the favourites to go through in those ties.
Yeah, I think so too.
The only one that's sort of in limbo, you'd probably say, is United against Atletico.
Yeah.
You'd say the other teams are probably overwhelming favourites, 100%. Especially, you'd think Man City Sporting is a banker, but I think you'd underestimate Sporting at your peril, because they're quite good. They're a good team. Some of their players that they've had come through the academy. I don't think there'll be rollovers, but you'd expect City to come through that. But Chelsea, Lille obviously got drawn twice. But
that was written in the stars, that one, wasn't it? And Chelsea will be absolutely over the moon with that. Even though Lille are French champions, they're having a very poor season so far. So you'd expect Chelsea to absolutely walk them. So if I pressed you now and said, with the draw the way that it is now, does it change your idea of who's going to win this competition the way things are right now?
I think Bayern Munich are probably getting overlooked quite a bit. I think there's a lot of focus on the English teams, and everyone's saying, this might be Man City's year, or Liverpool are probably going to go on and win it again. But I feel as though Bayern Munich are getting overlooked a lot, and
it's
fancy them this year. I know we said that last year, didn't we?
Yeah.
They had that unfortunate tie in the first leg against PSG, where they probably should have been outside. But
if Lewandowski stays fit for the Champions League this year, after missing some of last year, without Lewandowski, they're a different team. So with him fit again, it does help Bayern's prospects. I mean, Red Bull Salzburg must feel like they really missed out on the Red Bull luck this week, because they were originally drawn against Liverpool, managed to avoid them for the second draw, and thought, great. Nope, ended up with Bayern as well. So it's a bit of an interesting tie, that one. Bayern definitely look like the favourites in that one. The other one's, just to finish off the draw quickly, Villarreal, Juventus, and Benfica, Ajax. So a couple of interesting teams going through for it. So what you're saying, you think Bayern overall winners?
I wouldn't say if there was a team to win it, I'd like to see them win it. But I feel as though they've probably been a little bit unlucky over the last few years. I would like to see them win it if it was another team, because I don't want to see an English team win it. It's Chelsea, because I can't see Man City win it, and I don't want to see Liverpool win it. But I think of the teams left, realistically, who you would say probably go and win it, I'd like to see Bayern win it just because of how they play the game. And they're brilliant to watch. And Nagelsmann, I feel like it'd be such a such an achievement for him to come in and kind of put that marker down. So
Definitely.
yeah, I'd like to go on.
I hate to say it. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about whether Liverpool will sustain a challenge in the league with their players leaving for the African Cup of Nations in January. I can see them falling off in the league at that time and therefore putting all their eggs in the Champions League basket. And to me right now, I think they might be favourites for it. I wouldn't be surprised to see Liverpool go all the way. Now, hopefully, I've completely jinxed them and they're going to get knocked out by Inter now, but we'll see. On to the Europa League quickly. Now, it took me a while to make sense of it. If you win your Europa League group, you are automatically through to the next round. And they've added this extra round in for this year's competition, where the teams that drop down from the Champions League are put in a playoff before they get into the tournament properly against teams from the Europa League groups, which is, again, drawn some really tasty ties. You'd argue that some of these ties look better than the Champions League ones. Barcelona, of course, have dropped into the Europa League. Hilarious. And they are playing Napoli, who you've already said, Dave, look really entertaining this year. Now, their Serie A form has dropped off slightly, considering how well they started the season, and they now sit fourth. But I think they might be favourites for this, Dave.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I mean, especially with the results that Barcelona have been having the last few weeks, and obviously they drew again at the weekend 2-2 against Osasuna. We mentioned about Osimhen and his absence, but Mertens the last few weeks has stepped up and been scoring for fun. So yeah, you're probably right. And what a fall really for Barcelona to say that about Napoli. But for me, I'd be surprised if Barcelona beat them, because Napoli are a really good unit, as we've seen over the last few years, and we've come to expect to see them in the Champions League now, not in the Europa League. So
100%.
100%. That'll be a tasty time. I feel a bit sad and a bit sort of, I feel a little bit. What's the word? I feel a bit sorry for Rangers and how their ties kind of.
We'll come to that one. We will come to that one. Just quickly on the Barca and Napoli front, I think there's a lot of narrative to this one as well. Obviously, with Napoli and Barca being these two historic clubs, I think the player you mentioned there, Mertens, I think is key. He obviously was linked with a move to Barcelona quite a few times, actually, that never materialised. So he'll have a point to prove. How much does January define this tie, though? Because obviously Barcelona are still in mounds and mounds of debt, but are apparently looking to reinforce, including the talk of Edinson Cavani, which I think would be really interesting. And also, how much can Napoli rely on holding on to the players that they've got when other clubs are around with a lot of money these days? Do we think that the January transfer window could shape this fixture?
From what I've seen, obviously, you mentioned Cavani there, but my understanding is that he wants to go back to his homeland. So I'd be surprised if he went to Barcelona. And that would be a bit of a strange one, and it'd be a tasty one because obviously, he's playing against his former club as well. So again, it'd be interesting, but I can't see that happening. I've seen a lot of talk of Barcelona looking to pick up young talent in South America, and that's probably the best way for them to kind of operate it, because let's be honest, they just don't have the finances behind them to compete with other teams for these these big players. Like they talk about Haaland, surely you can't talk about him going to Barcelona. If he's going to Barcelona, then obviously something's not right, which we already know anyway. Something's not right with a lot of these deals, particularly the Pjanic and Arthur swap with Juve. That was a very dodgy one.
And that worked out really poorly. He's over in Besiktas
for both teams, really. Arthur can't get in the Juve team, and so. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I don't think it'll shape it massively. I still expect Napoli to come through that one. Regardless of what happens in the transfer window, because I can't see anything changing massively, especially as we know how hard it is to buy in January anyway and get the right players in and the right deal through, and just how Barcelona have operated in the transfer market recently anyway, it's been absolutely awful. So you can't really bank on them getting it right anyway. So I still expect Napoli to come through that.
Yeah. And the other fixture that you mentioned briefly there was Rangers against Dortmund, a proper classic European tie, that one is. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst obviously takes his new side over to Germany. What do you think for that? Do you think Rangers have got a chance in that tie, or do we see Dortmund picking up form again? Because they weren't convincing. They got knocked out of the Champions League group. So what do you think there? Can Rangers really put up a fight against Dortmund?
I'd like to see a competitive tie, and for how Rangers have done, especially in the last couple of years, and they've shown they can compete against some, pretty decent teams in Europe, these last couple of years, and obviously they've lost their manager now. So, but to be honest, they've kind of carried on from where they left off, really, on his absence team. So, I'd like to see a competitive team. I can't see them coming through it though. I just think Dortmund just got too much quality. As long as they are motivated as a team to go on and win it, because let's be honest, Dortmund, they've not won too many honours over these last 2 or 3 years. I'm sure they'll be looking to kind of push on and get a trophy. I'm sure Haaland will definitely be wanting a trophy during his time there as well. So.
Yeah, it does seem set up for him, doesn't it? He could go on, top scorer in the Europa League and win it for Dortmund, and then move to whichever team wins the Champions League as like an audition. Nice little little circular motion there for him. So moving away from European football then and back to what happened in the Premier League this weekend. It just seemed like the only thing that could happen this weekend was a team be awarded a penalty. I think we had 8 penalties awarded across the weekend, which was the most in the last, 18 years of Premier League fixtures for one weekend. And we were one fixture short of what we should have been at. So a really impressive number. When you look at the fact that the Champions League clubs that we just mentioned, Liverpool, Manchester City, Chelsea, and Manchester United, all won their games based on a penalty decision to give them the 1-0 or 1-goal lead. What did we think of the role of VAR this weekend? What did we think of the refereeing? And why was there so many penalties? What's going on with the rules over in the Premier League right
now? I think there's a lot of second guessing with the officials on the original decision. I think they're missing very basic calls as well. With the last couple of weeks, obviously, we saw, last week on, not last week, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, with Fred getting slightly for that absolute blatant. They're missing easy decisions as well as getting decisions massively wrong in terms of obviously giving the wrong decisions. But I just feel as though, obviously, the weekend as a whole wasn't exciting to watch. The fact that we only managed to see pretty much penalties as winning goals. But again, it's just a lot of uncertainty, I feel like, with the actual technology still. And I feel as though, obviously, a referee mentioned during the week is that he would always recommend to go and look at the screen. The referee to go and look at a screen is to kind of obviously see if you've made the right decision. I feel as though a lot of referees kind of don't want to get off their high horse and actually kind of validate whether they actually have made the right decision or not, and seem to a lot of the time go by their decision or listen to basically what VAR have said because. But the most ridiculous one has got to be the Man City.
It was an awful decision.
Awful.
Now, to be fair, Wolves hampered themselves in that game, or I should say Raul Jimenez hampered them in that game with bizarre play from him. He clearly didn't really know the rules. That's what it came across like to me, that he just kind of forgot what he was doing, because he intentionally blocks the free kick and then calls for the ball back as well. So he's obviously kind of forgotten what's going on there, or maybe didn't realise he'd been booked. I don't know, silly. But Wolves can feel very hard done by. That's never a penalty, ever, is it?
I think they were a little bit hard done by in 2 instances. I don't feel his first foul was a yellow card, but then he was stupid to go on and act the way he did. Not, but like he might have been misunderstanding the situation. But yeah, it's never a penalty, and you see the player's reaction as well coming from that, and he's adamant, absolutely adamant.
Angry, wasn't he?
There's no, and the thing is, I don't even what was the reasoning behind it? Is it just because there wasn't enough of a foregone conclusion to say that there was it was for definite that it did?
So this is one that really bothers me, because they talked about this whole t-shirt rule coming in, and it's abundantly clear in the still images. You can see where the ball hits him, and it hits him basically in his armpit. If it hits his shirt, then you've got to imagine that that's not a handball. He doesn't help himself because he does jump with his arm, and from the referee's angle, I can understand why the ref gave it. I can't understand why VAR doesn't overturn it, or ask him at least, go and look at that, see where it hits him and see if you're happy with that. Because once VAR looks at that and sees, okay, his body is in an unnatural position, he could have handballed it, but he didn't, then that's not a penalty. And there are a few decisions that just didn't sit right with me, where it seemed a bit more like it was reliant on what the attacker did than the defender did. Now, you can say that that's an intelligent attacking play. For example, Mings fouls Salah. He does. He brings him down. But Salah knows he's going nowhere with the ball. He wants to be fouled, and Mings falls for it. You can say the same of Rudiger. Twice in the Chelsea game, he anticipates the defender coming in and looks for the foul.
Like you say, Salah's going nowhere, and it's just a bit, I wouldn't say brainless, but a little bit naive of him, especially with his experience as well. But yeah, there's definitely a cleverness about attacking players at the minute, and it seems as though they are kind of getting the reward from being clever about it. Without, I know obviously we talk about kind of, the only thing I would say as well at the minute is players are going down easily, and and the thing is, commentators and pundits are scared to call it out, and it doesn't ever get really called diving. It's just always kind of, he's gone down a little bit easy, or he's touched him with slight contact, but there is players looking for it, and I think that's where we need to be a little bit sort of a little bit more strict with the ruling. And is it enough to actually take a player down? Is it?
Well, and the problem is, because VAR slows everything down and watches it, all you see is contact. So the attacker knows, if you look at this in very slow frame rates, you're going to see this defender touch me. If I go down, there's no momentum when you slow footage down like that. There's no idea of how much contact is actually made. It's a still image of, yeah, he's hit me. So if I go down, I'm going to get a foul. And it looks like they're playing for that. And I don't really like that. I don't want it to become that. And when you look at the fact that the 4 big teams all benefited from penalty decisions in this game, Ronaldo, even with Max Aarons, it's silly from Max Aarons. Ronaldo knows what he's doing. I mean, the ball didn't even land to Ronaldo. It went to the back post. But they got the penalty. It was clever. You'd call it clever forward play these days. And I don't know how that sits with me. And the fact that that's all we can talk about from the Premier League, it's not that entertaining, is it?
No, I think the ones that are most irritating are the ones when there's contact, but then there's a slight delay between them going down and being on their feet. So like, there's contact, they'll kind of stay on their feet a little bit, and then they go down. And it's like the penalty gets given, and you just sort of, they've bought it. They've clearly bought it, and that's what's frustrating to see. And not just even in for game-changing moments, but just the flow of games. Sometimes it just seems as though players are just they're just happy just to go down and the gust of a win of win. So, but yeah, it's frustrating, especially in a weekend where a lot of the big teams who competing at the top of the table, all of their results go kind of concluded on the decision of a penalty decision. So
yeah, well, those decisions led to Manchester City beating Wolves 1-0, Liverpool beating Aston Villa 1-0, Chelsea beat Leeds 3-2, and Manchester United beat Norwich 1-0. Elsewhere in the Premier League, Crystal Palace got a good win against a very poor Everton side, 3-1 the result there. Leicester back to winning ways as well with a 4-0 win over Newcastle. We saw a boring 0-0 between Burnley and West Ham, and then a good result for Arsenal, 3-0 against Southampton. The only good result they've got this week, though, it seems. Captain Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang under more disciplinary issues, more scrutiny shone on him, and now he has been stripped of the captaincy. Once again, an Arsenal captain having an issue, having the captain's armband taken from him. Once again, Arsenal's highest earner coming to a difficult stage in his career where he's given this big contract and then has problems follow and is exiled from the team. He wasn't in the squad to face Southampton. It's been confirmed he won't be available for selection against West Ham. And now Arsenal are looking for a new captain. Just as it seemed, they were building a bit of a team and some morale and a bit of a philosophy there. Do you see this having a big disruption to the Arsenal camp, Dave? Because if we're honest, they've been on a good run of form, but they've been winning games that you'd expect them to win. They have not beaten anyone really that would be a challenge for them. Can this be a stumbling block for them, do you think?
potentially, yeah. I mean, it depends how many, well, I'd say friends in the dressing room that Aubameyang has, has, and how well respected he is by his peers. So it could create. I mean, I've not got a huge understanding of the situation, and I've heard that his basically, was it to do with his mother who was bringing him back?
So there was talk that he had it agreed that he could take a trip to France, but had to return within a certain window, and he missed that window and was late back. I think in isolation that would be one thing, but there have been countless issues with Aubameyang. He also was disciplined, I think, back in February for getting a tattoo that breached COVID regulations. He was obviously dropped from the Spurs game at one point because he arrived late to training, and he had several issues at Dortmund too. So this isn't an incident in isolation. And when Arteta is trying to lay the foundations of a squad and the right temperament and kind of get rid of the negative air that has been around Arsenal Football Club for a long time now, whether within the fan base or the club or the playing staff or the owners, whatever it may be, you can kind of understand why he just can't tolerate anything else. So what is it within the club that is causing this to happen over and over again?
I think maybe lack of ownership, lack of leadership in that dressing room, and whether Arteta actually has the authority and respect of all of those players in that dressing room. I think you've got to say, there were big questions over Aubameyang even before he came to Arsenal. You heard about stories over his mentality and whether he'd be the right player to bring in. And obviously Arsenal took that gamble. And let's be honest, he's been brilliant and been there, for the most part. But yeah, you've got to say it'll be interesting now to see what happens and how they react with that. And I think, to be honest, Arteta might well have done the right thing. Might well have kind of been able to make that decision. And it'll be interesting to see who's obviously given the armband. And
well, that's the biggest thing for me. That's the biggest thing for me. There's been a lot of praise for Arsenal this season about the young side that they're developing. But one thing that young side really lacks is a leader. Obviously, they had Xhaka before, but they're not going to give Xhaka the captaincy back after stripping it from him previously. Lacazette wore the armband at the weekend, but there's talk that he might be leaving the club quite soon. So it would be an odd decision to give it to him. And then everyone else, they've not been there very long. They're incredibly young, and no one really shows any leadership. For me, I would probably say Kieran Tierney. However, he's not been playing every week because Tavares has come in and been really good, and Tierney's injured quite a lot. Odegaard is Norway's captain, but I'm not sure that's necessarily because of his leadership qualities or whether it's just because he's a bit of a talisman. So who would you pick then, Dave? Who's the ideal candidate at Arsenal to take this team and go, come on, we do need some discipline, we do need some organisation right now? And who will deal with the fact that you're going to have Aubameyang in the dressing room, pretty disgruntled, you'd imagine?
Yeah, obviously you mentioned there Tierney and not being in the team, choosing obviously Tavares over him, which I don't know whether I fully agree with that decision myself. I feel like he'd probably be an ideal pick. At Celtic, he was, a real leader in that team. So it wouldn't be new to him to kind of, take up that responsibility. But I know there was rumours today about there was talk over Gabriel and Ben White, which I think would be a mistake. Obviously, he's only just walked through the doors of the club, but he's a young player himself. To give him that responsibility, I feel like would probably be a little bit unfair.
Well, with Gabriel, I do like having a centre half as your captain because they're a very commanding presence anyway. It gives them a direct line between organising their defence and midfield all at once. I do see the logic behind it. Ben White is young and still new to the club, and I don't feel like he's got the same sort of presence that Gabriel has got. So that does make sense. Another name I wanted to float at you, is it too early for Bukayo Saka? Because to me, I'm not sure about on the pitch, but he definitely seems like a leader off it. He's someone who's been through a lot already, clearly really loves the club, sets a great example on the pitch through his playing. Is it a step too far to give him the captaincy as well, do you think?
I think what you mentioned there about Tierney not always being on the team, that's been the case a little bit with Saka this season. He's not always been in the team. So I think it might just be a little bit too early for that. But I can see what you're saying about him being obviously an example off the pitch, and he's actually proven to be, a real fan favourite for Arsenal over these last couple of years. So, like you say, there's just a lack of options, isn't there? Really. So, I mean, probably wouldn't be surprised by any decision they make at the minute because there's no clear, outstanding candidate. I feel for that armband.
Or is that something they can address in January then, and maybe try and bring in some leadership?
Again, though, like you say, it's a strange one to bring somebody in. They've only just come into the club, and then they're immediately the captain of a club that they are brand new to. They don't know, the ins and outs. Probably not entirely, clued up with the heritage of the club, and they don't know their teammates very well. So I mean, it's one thing kind of being captain and giving the armband, but it's about knowing your teammates, knowing their way of playing, knowing how to kind of instruct and how to speak to different players. And I think it's going to be a little bit premature probably just to kind of give someone the armband who's brand new into a club. And they found obviously that was a big one that was kind of debated at United, how Harry Maguire was just basically given the captaincy and was fresh in the doors, and that was another one that was kind of blown up, and which I kind of agree with. So it'd be interesting to see, like you say, who does get it. It wouldn't surprise me if it was someone like Gabriel, because like you say, he does kind of have the stature as a player to kind of I feel kind of take on that responsibility. So I don't know if there's not a safe option, is there really?
No. No. And it's not the first time we've seen this happen at Arsenal either. So it's a bit of a difficult situation that they'll be hoping doesn't derail their season. Another club that look like they are in a lot of trouble right now is Everton. Obviously lost again at the weekend after picking up a win over Arsenal in their last fixture. Fallen back off straight away, and things just go from bad to worse with Everton. So since the start of October, they have won just one game, drawn 2, and lost 7. Now we know about the injury problems they already had. We talked a lot about them missing Calvert-Lewin, Yerry Mina for periods, Decore for periods, Andre Gomez for periods. Now added to the list, Richarlison is going to be out for a few weeks, along with Andres Townsend and Seamus Coleman. And they're still not picking up points. Talk that Benitez's job might be under fire now, and maybe they're going to look to some other candidates. I've seen a lot of talk on Twitter, although I imagine it is just Twitter talk, of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer being lined up, which would be hilarious for all. But what do Everton do next, Dave? Because genuinely, could we see Everton in a relegation battle this season?
I don't feel as though I mean, we've seen strange things happen in this league before, but I'll be very surprised if they got relegated, just because I feel like they've still got a fairly decent squad, even with those injuries. And obviously, you know, without the likes of Demarai Gray this season, which is, you know, crazy to say because, you know, he only came in for 1.5 million, an absolute bargain, and he's performed really well. But it's just kind of not had the support around him. I don't feel there's not been any consistency within Everton's performances or results, and you've got to feel a little bit sorry for Rafa Benitez because he's not been helped by these injuries at all. You know, you can say, you know, you can make the excuses, but he has had a lot of injuries. Obviously, they've had that talisman who's been out for a while in Calvert-Lewin, and they've just really struggled. And it says a lot when Crystal Palace have been struggling for the last few weeks. They come up against Everton and absolutely wipe the floor with them.
Yeah, a great performance from Conor Gallagher again as well, including a lovely second goal from him as he's having a great season. And Palace cement themselves in mid-table. Obviously, we have midweek fixtures this week as well. Missing at least one though. Now, obviously, we saw the Tottenham-Brighton game was called off at the weekend, and now Manchester United's fixture against Brentford won't be happening either. Well, at least not now, due to a COVID outbreak at the club. Now, we've dealt with COVID within football before. We've seen the impact that it can have on the game. However, coming up to a really busy Christmas schedule that then leads into an African Cup of Nations, which then leads into a shorter pre-season as we start next season earlier, ready for a World Cup. And it just feels like there is football after football after football after football. What do we do about this? We already see that now Spurs are unable to reorganise their game with Rennes for the Europa Conference League. So they might have to forfeit from an entire competition because of a COVID outbreak. What do you see the impact being here, Dave? And what does football have to do to relieve this fixture congestion and deal with the pandemic once again?
Well, obviously, we've seen that Premier League have brought in the previous regulations they had in place for obviously when COVID was sort of at its peak before. I feel it's a bit premature. You know, it's been in the news for weeks now about this new variant that's coming in. It's going to kind of cause a new wave. I feel as though it's been really a little bit slow by the Premier League in how they've acted. They were very, very late in announcing United's game being cancelled tonight. I don't think it got announced until like 1 a.m. in the morning, which is mental when you think that fans have got to travel and, put travel plans into place to get them from games. So why that was delayed for so long was just bizarre, considering it was announced in the afternoon around 3 or 4 p.m. yesterday. I think that the game was in doubt, and yet it took 10 hours to announce that it had been postponed. So,
and to be fair, even more annoying because I had to then make a decision about what I was going to do with Ronaldo in my fantasy team, to be honest, mate. So never mind the fans travelling. What am I going to do to move up the FPL league?
I mean, again, it obviously raises questions again now. It seems as though the game with Brighton at the weekend is probably unlikely to go ahead as well. I can't imagine they are too disgruntled by that as well, though, Brighton, because I know they've got a few absences from their squad that they're having a few troubles with COVID as well.
Yeah.
So is it now just a matter of time before we start to see this as a widespread problem with most teams in the league?
But where do these games go? Like, we've already seen Tottenham cannot find time to fit their next fixture in. The more games that get postponed, Brighton already missed the Spurs game at the weekend as well. The calendar is tight, and with the reluctance of the FA to relieve any of the competitions and the FA Cup going ahead as expected and the League Cup going ahead, and we now have 3 European club competitions as well. Like, I feel like there's an oversight, and although we all like to talk about how footballers shouldn't really complain because they earn ridiculous amounts of money, what a weird time and stress for them to have to navigate as well. They're just going to be exhausted, and we're going to end up having a very poor quality World Cup at this rate because everyone's going to be knackered.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the perfect thing to happen for me would be have an extended circuit breaker in the winter period and give the players a few weeks off during this, while this wave kind of passes by, because we're at a key period in the calendar now in terms of obviously fixtures, but obviously in terms of this pandemic and what's kind of going on across Europe, really we've got to think that the staff and players' safety has got to be paramount. It's got to be number one, and it just seems as though that's kind of getting overlooked a little bit for me.
It definitely is, because they're trying to navigate how they deal with the Qatar World Cup. Because if you delay the Premier League season during the winter or any of the seasons across Europe, then how does that impact the World Cup that we're meant to be having next Christmas?
I mean, what's it going to take though? Is it, is it going to take for, the worst to happen for them to realise actually, this league season isn't the most important thing? And again, for me, it's kind of obvious what should really happen, and I feel as though there should be some sort of circuit breaker, particularly soon, if not in the next couple of weeks, that should just give the players a bit of kind of protection, because it's just, I feel like the situation is just going to get worse, and we're going to see this becoming more of a common thing. Fixtures are going to be postponed, and the fixture list is going to pile up. So obviously you can't say it's an easy fix at all, is it? But again, it's, when it comes to health and safety of all players and obviously staff and everyone in the game, not just that, but we're continuing to see full packed stadiums. It's not helped the situation at all.
No.
The last thing that I want to see is players playing in empty stadiums again, and I'm sure you don't want to see that either.
I quite enjoyed watching it without the crowd noise, to hear Tyrone Mings just shouting all the Villa players, but yeah, definitely not. Definitely don't want to see that.
I'd rather wait and kind of wait out until fans are able to watch these games, because we went for a long period of time without fans being able to attend games, and don't want to be in that.
But sadly, we know that it's not the fans in the ground that really matter anymore. It's the fans watching across the world on TV. So as long as that can still happen, football will continue. It's a difficult one, mate. But thank you for talking with me this week. After what wasn't necessarily the most eventful Premier League weekend, I think we've had a good chance to catch up on everything else for a change. So appreciate your time. Thank you to everyone that was watching as well. You can, of course, follow us, subscribe to us on our various platforms, including YouTube, but also our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, which you can see over in one of the corners. You'll find it somewhere. But until next time, thank you very much, Dave, for joining me.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Hopefully we get a few fixtures to discuss, and not a few smaller and smaller.
If not, mate, me and you will just go play 1v1 in the park, and we'll talk about how that went next time. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you, everyone, for watching the Football Diary podcast, and we'll see you next week.